God of the universe, maker of the stars. Who am I that you would know my name?
Welcome to this week's Life on Purpose. What am I doing here, Alex? I got kind of confused
You
on what
know,
program I was on.
that's all right. I listened to your Living Torah portion just the other day, and
Okay,
I heard
okay.
that cadence in your voice there.
Yeah, I know. It's just
Mm.
sometimes. Kathy said, "So, how many programs do you have to do today?" I'm like, "Oh, one, two." Sometimes you're kind of crazy. So, episode number 88 of Life on Purpose. That's what we're doing. And the reason I know that is because the person I'm looking at on the computer screen is Alex Stiles. How are you, man?
Happy to be here, sir.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we're going to get into this third part of kind of back to the garden theme that we've been doing and discussing the concepts of men, of women. And the wonderful thing about this program, Alex, is I think as a brain nurse and, as me, just a kind of a common sense type of person, we have had no discussion on, what those terms mean, have we?
On the brain nurse terms,
No,
where did you
no,
lost me
no,
there?
on male and female.
Oh, that's absolutely fantastic because this concept is not up for debate. It's a very binary, 0 and 1. There is no in
Mhm.
between. God created them male and female, and you know
Mhm.
what? There's no question on that. And it can be a joy to hang out within and be around and interact with people who understand that uh, foundational concept there.
Yeah, yeah, because the other side is chaos, and the eventual outcome of that is that if you become confused about those terms of male and female, you can you will subject yourself to lifestyles and other things that will keep you from being able to obey the first commandment given to Adam and Eve, which was be fruitful and multiply.
Yes, absolutely,
It's
absolutely
interesting that it is only in humankind that we see such confusion.
true.
All right. You look out, you have trees, you have the birds and the bees and all those kind of things that you're supposed to teach your children about, and there's no confusion in creation. In fact, creation, for the most part, does not have to learn how to be creation.
Yes. Mhm.
Okay. I don't have to go out into the woods and teach a tree how to be a tree.
Absolutely. That sounds almost like a silly statement until you ponder like it's foundational.
Hmm.
Mankind is the only thing that doesn't understand what he or she, what they are, and what we're called to do, and what we're supposed to be. We're the
Hmm.
only one that loses sight of that.
And in fact, we can step in as this human creation whenever we step into it, into the rest of creation. We normally bring confusion, not order.
This is true.
Okay.
Absolutely.
We're in the discussions now regarding the election of GMO and hybrid and all of these kind of things. None of that occurred prior to man deciding he needed to be, some part of it that was acting kind of like God.
Agree. Same. Um, Apologies, my distraction there. The red alert went off.
Yeah, I know.
Um,
Kirit Shimona, Tel High. Yeah, yeah, it's continual. Uh,
Absolutely. Mankind can we take our own chaos, but because we seek our own wisdom, follow our own decisions, and create chaos, and then we spread that chaos quite well.
mhm.
And chaos spreads far easier than order.
You think? Yeah,
Mm.
it's easy to get there. I was thinking about it as in this concept. Years ago, Kathy and I moved to Oklahoma. We decided that we would like to try the hobby farm thing.
Oh.
Yeah, yeah. Now, a hobby farm is kind of like a boat. A boat, the definition of a boat is a hole in the water to throw money into. Okay. So a hobby farm is pretty much you're going to throw money at it. It's never going to come back to you. And so a friend of mine knew that I wanted to have horses. Why I needed a horse, looking back at it, um, I was stupid. Okay, I love people that love horses, but I'm just not the kind of horse person because I found out that with a horse, it's not a matter of if you're going to get hurt. It's like how long will it take to recover from it? Okay, it's going to happen. And so this friend of mine I met and they said, "You're looking for a horse." I said, "Yeah." They said, "Well, we have a horse and I believe the father told us to give this horse to you." And I'm like, "Wow, this is cool." It was an Arabian, beautiful Arabian named Aliyah, which is Hebrew for return or for going up. And so they were going to give me this horse. And they said, "But we're going to have to wait about 6 more months." And I'm like, "Okay." And they said, because the horse needs to learn how to be a horse because before it is around you and learning how to be not a pet, but a trainable item. It needed to learn from other horses how to be a horse. It never dawned on me, Alex, that a horse needed to learn from other horses how to be a horse. Because if I stepped in and I raised this thing from a little baby, I'm going to raise it kind of as a pet, which was what this
Absolutely.
other person I met raised a horse like that. And the silly thing would as 1,000 pound animal would try to lay down in your lap. When the mailman came up the
What
driveway,
could possibly go wrong?
yeah, I know. The mailman would drive up the driveway and he would have to make sure that he closed the door because the horse didn't know that it had grown too big to fit in the car that his owner used to put him in to drive him around the town. Totally bring confusion to the horse world.
Yeah, absolutely.
So how do we deal with this? What do we do? How about when we ask the question about becoming a man?
Mm. So I would say if we bring chaos or confusion into creation, it does not even hold a candle to the amount of chaos and confusion that we bring into our own kind.
Mm-hmm.
The spreading of chaos and confusion among mankind by us. Um, Absolutely, because then the sheer idea of attempting to grow into a man, the idea of becoming a man is the idea that you could be what you should be, the most that you should be, fulfilling the roles that you should be, having the capabilities that you should have, whatever this should be that defines you as a man. But absolutely, if you have no foundation, if you have no example, if you have no horse to teach you how to be a horse, and I
Yeah.
think we've hit the nail on the head here, right? Look at the sheer number of broken families in which there is no father to teach the son how to become a man.
Mm-hmm. So last week you were, kind of going to and for the last 2 weeks you've been talking about the women, and
Mhm.
the issues that women deal with, and I just couldn't quite. We talked about this on Shabbat. I couldn't quite help myself, and everything. I brought it back to the man
Yes,
because I firmly believe that if you will fix the role of a male in our society, then other roles will follow in suit of that.
absolutely. And that's not a very popular opinion.
No.
No. It's because the very concept of being a man, and let me define a few things by that, of being uh, emotionally strong. I don't mean you have to be physically strong. being strong in spirit, strong in
Hmm.
emotion, being willing to say no, being willing to lead in the household, both in the matters that you will say no to things and you will say yes to things as you should,
Hmm.
not that you're just the yes man. These roles are under attack
Hmm.
very much in it's beginning to be called, oh, it's toxic masculinity. It's a phrase I keep hearing tossed around.
What do you think that actually means? Okay, you're involved in more of a society in your job. You have many different aspects. I know that Kathy and our daughter is a actually started out as a nurse. She's now administrative over a hospital, and has told us about all the things that she has to deal with these different
Mm.
personalities and the gender stuff and all of that, pronouns and all that kind of things. um how do you see people defining that word toxic masculinity out there in your circles?
It comes, honestly, in almost all manners, all aspects of it, straight up from the point of, gosh, how can I define this? My word. It's a rather complex issue that I think has, some simple foundations. Um, the defining of toxic masculinity is you're toxically masculine if you say, I'm going to lead my household.
Hmm.
If you say, as for me and my house, we will follow God,
Mm-hmm.
you're toxically masculine. What, you're trying
Wow.
to keep your wife barefoot and pregnant in the house?
Hmm.
No, no. I mean, my wife wants to be a stay-at-home mom, so I try to enable that, but no, I
Mm-hmm.
don't force that. Um, if you're willing to be aggressive enough, and let me define that, if you're willing to aggressive enough to find if you're willing to be confrontational over the things that are worth confronting about.
Okay.
Someone's about to doing something wrong, and you're willing to argue and say, no, absolutely not.
Hmm.
If you're that's considered in a truly generic psychology term that is willing to be disagreeable is actually how it's termed, that you are disagreeable and that you are truly willing to disagree with someone.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're not a yes man,
So
you're not a
stand up
yes
for
man, you're
your
toxic.
so have convictions and stand up for them. Would that
Yes,
be okay?
yes. If you're willing to make absolute statements, you're
Mm.
toxically masculine.
Ooh.
It's There are absolutes that we deal in. Sin is sin. It's wrong. Oh, well, you're not supposed to say this is absolutely wrong. You're supposed to say, you don't believe that. If
Mm-hmm.
you're just shoving your beliefs, then you're being toxically masculine. If you're willing just to straight up say, absolutely not.
Hmm.
It comes down to the point that you're considered toxically masculine if you will straight up define that men are physically stronger than women. I think that's pretty foundational. But
It
like
is.
I didn't think biology was up for debate, but it
Mm-hmm.
is.
I mean, I know women that are bodybuilders, and I mean, there are women that
Absolutely.
I've met that are stronger than me.
Mhm.
But for the most part, what we're talking about is the anatomy of a male is based on greater ability for strength than the
Mhm.
anatomy of a female.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And in some ways, even down to that foundational level, straight up that it's considered toxically masculine to say that there are jobs that men are physically or emotionally better equipped to deal with. Straight up
Hmm.
manual labor jobs out there, breaking stone and stonemasons and construction. It's women that can do it, but these physically more demanding jobs. Like it's to be toxically masculine is to embrace, straight up seems to me to be to embrace the gifts that God has given you.
Hmm.
That generally speaking, as a man, you're psychologically more willing to disagree when it's necessary, and that physically you are more capable of enduring physically difficult tasks, whether that is long-term stamina endurance, whether that is physical strength, these basic things. What I see attacked in this concept, this constant argument of toxic masculinity, is the attack on the gifts that God has given men and the
Hmm.
strengths that God has
Hmm.
given men.
So I'm thinking that we could coin a new phrase tonight. Okay. People can say they heard it here first on episode number 88 of Life on Purpose. What would it be like to be a toxic female?
Mhm.
Toxic femininity. Okay. That would mean that you freely share your emotions,
Mhm.
that you're willing to be nurturing, that
Yep.
you're willing to care for someone, even at the expense of your own being at times. That means that you are willing to put another human being before their needs before yours. That's called mom. Um, that you're willing to support that one, that you're willing to even allow your physical being to go through changes that may not, be at times, look positive, in order for another life to be born. Okay. That
Mhm.
you're willing. I mean, if so, toxic femininity would be to choose nurturing another, even at your own expense.
I will add one more thing in toxic femininity, is what the world would call it, would very much be that willingness to embrace the fact that no one is more capable of supporting your husband in his endeavors than you, the wife, are.
Mm,
If you were to embrace that concept that no one was better able to support him than you, that would also be something that is mocked and is attacked.
wow, hadn't thought about that one. Okay, we've got some we've got some things we'll probably talk about off the air, and next time I see you, we'll kind of discuss some of this. So basically, if we are desiring to live our lives in the manner and role that the creator has designed that to be, the world would call that toxic.
Yes, absolutely. What are immediate reasons that you ponder? I had a couple of reasons I was going to throw out there, but why do you suppose that these exact roles, this embracing of God's gifts, gets labeled as toxic?
Wow, what a question. Why
Yeah,
does it,
yeah.
yeah,
Mm,
why does it get labeled as toxic? Because toxic is something that is viewed in a negative aspect.
yeah.
If water
Yes.
is toxic, you don't drink it. Why? Because it's deadly. We've just
Hmm.
gone through this up in Asheville area where
Hmm.
they have just lifted the boil your water uh, thing that that's been going on since the hurricane. Why? Because that water had toxins that if you drank it could make you sick or could kill you.
Mm.
Okay. So that word toxic is tied to something that is harmful,
So
which is, go ahead.
could it be that if you were to embrace solidly this binary role, you are man or you are woman, and that it's not enough to be just male or female, but you must embrace the gifts that he gave you in that.
Hmm.
Could it be that this embracing of these are toxic in that sense, and that they must put to death a lot of lifestyles out there that don't line up with God's commands? The lifestyles themselves being, to die to yourself
Hmm.
in that sense.
Hmm. So it literally is the verses of scripture that there will be a day in which right is called wrong and wrong is called right.
Absolutely.
Okay. Or as
Absolutely.
or as we look in the book of Acts, it is said of the disciples, these are the men who turn the world upside down. Now, the truth is, if we look at the book of Acts and we see the context of this, the world was already upside down. So, if
Yes.
in the eyes of the world, these people turned the world upside down, then they were really turning it right side up, and the world thought it was upside down. I hope
Mhm.
everybody can follow that one. Okay. So we come along, and it's like I had a conversation with a couple of guys. We were walking a golf course the other day, and they started talking about religion. And one of them was like, well, this church says, and this church says, and this church says. And I said, they were like, well, what church do you follow? I said, I don't. They're
Mhm.
like, but you're the preacher. I said, yeah. I said, I follow the Bible.
Mhm.
But what denomination? I said, no, 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 you didn't hear me. I follow the Bible. I said, I open the book, and what the book says, I do, or
Mhm.
attempt to do, or not to do. And they looked at me like, that's the craziest thing I've ever heard in my life. Why don't you go and follow some church doctrine or denomination? I mean, I could have been speaking this in you know in Pig Latin or whatever, and they would have still looked at me the same way because they could not grasp a concept that there would be a human being alive that would open the Bible and would believe it
Mhm.
and would seek to follow it and would not try to question the one who wrote it.
Mhm. The other component of that, I think, is that also that the idea that it requires effort on your part.
Mm,
It's much easier just to float downstream with whatever
yeah.
denomination and never question it. Now,
Yeah.
maybe that denomination's headed the right direction and maybe it's not.
Mm,
But the point is, did you question it? Did you check the Bible yourself? So that idea that you say, I follow the Bible, well, then that lays this big weight on you that you actually have to open it up yourself and understand for yourself what it says. Instead of just asking the preacher, what do I believe?
mm,
Preacher, the priest, whatever you follow, just
mm,
ask that other man, what do I
mm.
believe?
Man or woman. Yeah.
Right.
It's the concept of, I've used many times. Any dead fish can swim downstream.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
dead fish think that they're right because they're flowing the same direction as the other dead fish.
Sure.
That
Everyone's
this
doing it. It must be right.
Yeah. If everybody's flowing the same way I am in the creek, then we must all be going the right direction. Where in actuality, the direction we're going in is to a waterfall in which whoever's not quite dead is going to have a crazy ride and is now going to be dead. Final dead, the big DEAD on the bottom of the rocks there. Okay. And you got this
Yeah.
one fish, this one fish out of the whole river that's like, guys, I think we ought to go that way. And they think he's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I've lived about 30 something years like this, Alex, of bucking the flow, going the opposite direction. And everybody thinks you're crazy. Your family, your friends, you're like, why do you want to do that? Because that's what the scripture says. Is
Mm-hmm.
is it any more complicated than that?
It is and it isn't, because you have this concept we talked about. We've talked about a couple times, at least in Shabbat meetings, about discernment.
Mm-hmm.
Have knowing what the scripture actually says, and this idea of discernment being one thing that we truly lack. I'll share this story briefly that a rabbi shared, in which I forget which rabbi I would quote if I could, in which he asked this fellow wanted to learn was getting into the jade market. And I didn't know this, but apparently when you're buying and selling jade, there's a great deal of false jade out there, and it's very
Mm,
hard to tell the difference.
okay.
So he goes to this master, this gentleman who's just world-renowned jade expert, and he says, I want to learn about jade. He says, okay. He hands him a piece of jade, puts it in his hand. The guy's just sitting there holding it and waiting for the guy to teach him. Instead, the guy spends about 2 hours talking about history. Random, not even history of jade, just random history subjects. He's like, Okay. Comes back the next week. Guy hands him a piece of jade. He stands there and he's just fiddling with it in his hands while this guy then talks about science. Not even the science of jade. He does this two, three, four more times and he's getting frustrated. He's like, I'm going to give up. But he walks in about this fifth time. The guy hands him a rock and he looks straight at him and says, This isn't jade. He says, I know, because you've held the jade in your hand every time you've been here. You've
Hmm.
spent time with it. You know the weight of it, the feel of it. There is nothing more there's the guy says there's nothing I can teach you, tell you, talk to you about that will teach you to tell real jade from fake jade.
Wow.
You have to spend time with it in your hands.
Hmm.
The same manner, there's no amount, to some extent, there's no amount that any preacher, any teacher can stand there and talk to you
Yeah.
about scripture. You won't know for yourself until you have spent time with the scripture in your hand, personally, reading it, praying over it, and studying it. And then when someone says something that is false, you're going to recognize it. Why? Because you've spent time with the real thing. And until you spend that time yourself, you're not going to have that discernment. And that's why that discernment almost doesn't exist for so many people, is they don't actually spend time themselves
Mhm.
in the word and in prayer with God in order to recognize something that doesn't line up with it.
You have now answered a question I have been asking for decades.
Oh dear.
Oh dear. And have
Mhm.
never been able to really concisely figure it out. I've looked back, I've pondered so many times, continual, I think, 31 years of full-time ministry now. And I have pondered the people that I have seen come in, become involved in a congregation, a church, when I was pastoring a conference, whatever. They're excited, they're enthusiastic, they're raising their hands in worship, they're doing, dancing, whatever. And I've pondered the number of people that have then walked away
Mhm.
versus the some would call minute number that have come in and have gone through the same basic formula, it seems like, but it's stuck. And the one factor that defines who is still there and who is not is their personal time here.
Mhm.
Because if it does not matter, and you've heard in the last couple of years that we've known each other, you've heard hundreds of messages by me already, and some will respond and some don't. Some just kind of stand up and walk out the door. Why? If a person is spending time in the Word and spending time in prayer, spending time in His presence, then whatever I say is just helping that process along. But if a
Absolutely.
person is not spending that time in the Word, in prayer, in His presence, then my words are pretty much empty and can really
Yes,
do
because they
nothing.
have
It's like trying to plant a seed. Well, as Yeshua would say, in rocks. Go ahead.
absolutely, because they have no frame of reference to understand what you're saying, what you're talking about. If they don't know anything about the scripture for themselves.
Yeah.
Um, absolutely, there's a huge component of that. To be a follower of Yeshua, to be a part of the kingdom, however you want to call it, to be a part
Hmm.
of the kingdom is not a passive process.
No, boy, no.
You can't stick your thumb out and ask for, somebody pick me up, give me a ride to the kingdom.
Yeah, you don't get it by osmosis.
Mm-mm, mm-mm. It didn't work in college. trying to get my nursing degree. No matter how many times I fell asleep on my textbook, I could not learn the Krebs cycle or any other anatomy and physiology section. It doesn't and it doesn't work in scripture. It doesn't work that way either. Like you have to be actively involved in it. And no one is standing here. You and I don't think you or I either one are standing here saying, "Oh, it's easy." Like, no, it's the hard path. Like
Oh,
you
yeah.
crazy enough to make the decision you're going to be actively involved, that you're actively going to read. Because like you think your house is in a little bit of chaos, decide that you're going to read the scripture and then watch something happen. Okay. It happens. Okay.
Yeah.
And I'm saying that in half joking, but I'm serious. Talk about your life then. Like you think you're dealing with temptations, like try to bail in there and really focus on God, and then you'll see some temptations and
Hmm.
problems in your life really flare up
Hmm.
because you're going the direction that the enemy doesn't want you to go. He can leave you alone if you're, doing what he wants you to do. Harsh statement, but true.
Yeah, it is. It is. This is not the easiest road. And so when we talk about this of becoming a godly person, you have to embrace that.
Hmm.
You have
Yes.
to make a desire. You have to make it a goal that I am going to be that person that is going to follow the word. So that brings us kind of full circle back to how do you become a man after God's own heart? How do you become a woman after God's own heart? How do you become the Proverbs 31 woman? How do you become the Psalm 1 man?
Mhm.
Well, one of the basics of this is you need to find others that you respect in the process.
Yes, absolutely. Because I think if we've said something, I'll summarize what we've said in some extent is in this process of becoming a godly man, of becoming the man that you should be, you have to recognize in this change from a child to a man or from child to woman, you have to recognize that there is something that exists that is greater than you. Now, the
Hmm.
highest pinnacle of this, of course, is to recognize that God exists greater than you. Lower levels of this are the idea that there are certain concepts and values that are more important. The mother who you're a child, but then you become a mother and you're willing to do without sleep, without food, without whatever you need for that baby in your arms.
Hmm.
Why? Because this baby now exists as something that is of greater value than yourself.
Yeah.
The highest pinnacle of this is to recognize God exists as a value and a authority greater than yourself.
Hmm. So when we make that come to that realization, make a desire to embrace it, it seems like it would be easy, Alex. I mean, there's what, 7, 8 billion people on the face of the earth.
8.3-ish, I think. Yeah.
8.3. Okay. It seems like out of the 8.3 billion people, that it wouldn't be that hard to find somebody that's worth following.
You would think. Um,
Yeah, you would
yeah.
think.
Hmm.
But in truth, when you set out to try to surround yourself with godly men or godly women, um, you know, it can be like the proverbial needle in a haystack.
Hmm.
Because I have to tell you, there's just not a lot of people out there that, to me, there's not a lot of people out there worth following these days.
This is very true. Trying to find people that, particularly when you're trying to not just find somebody who's, walking beside you, where you can both look at each other and be like, and neither of us really know what we're doing, but we recognize we're heading in the same direction. Who are the two of us going to turn to as a mentor?
Mm-hmm.
When you elevate to that next level where you're trying to find mentor, like there's a reason I end up turning to a lot of different history books in history, like the people that have, because I'm surfing through about a few thousand, few billion people, and I found a few
Mm-hmm.
that I'm willing that have survived the test, and I could say, well, their wisdom, their offering has worked for several thousand people over a couple thousand years in all varieties of walks of life. And okay, so they must have something worth saying. Looking around modern and trying to find, I see fewer and fewer. And not trying to be a terrible pessimist, but I think I back it up with scripture as the falling away of from him continues as we come closer to the end times, wherever those may be, there continues to be a greater falling away from
Hmm.
him. And I think
Hmm.
those number of people that we find worth following are are fewer and fewer.
When I got saved, came to Messiah, whatever it was, however we term that these days, um, I was blessed in that I had some people around me that at least led me into the right places. I mean, I had some men around me that I respected, um, but then I also went to books
Hmm.
and I began to read people like Smith Wigglesworth, Leonard Ravenhill, David Wilkerson, John G. Lake, numerous others. I started reading about these people and their lives, and so much of my life became um, kind of a mirror image of what I saw in those books.
Hmm.
Today, unfortunately, the attention span of most people is not that they even have the attention span to read a book. It's got to be it's got to be a 3 second TikTok or whatever, whatever social media they're at, because the goldfish has the attention span of 8 seconds. The last I saw, the typical human 3.1. So you
Hmm.
have to go 3.1. It has been in 87 episodes prior to this one. It's been a challenge to me of, well, okay, maybe we could just do this in 10 minutes.
Hmm.
Maybe if we just cut it down to 15, we would have more people. But I don't feel that we can do justice to a message in that
Hmm.
amount of time. So
I agree.
probably the people that we have that are watching on a regular basis are the ones that we're talking to, and are going, yeah, yeah, that's what I'm searching for, because they're willing to put out the time, the effort in order to become the person, the man of God, the woman of God, the teenager of God, the young adult of God. They're willing to put that effort into the goal that is there.
I agree because there's no investment in a 20-second video, not much investment in a 10-minute video,
Mm.
and there's not much return on your time entered. I've never seen a 20-second video that's actually changed my life, sir. I've done my fair share of doom scrolling. All right, and when I've had, YouTube shoots, this is what it's called. Okay, legit, it's doom scrolling. When you're
Yeah.
scrolling through these 20-second videos because you're depressed and you're trying to find a hit of dopamine to make
Okay.
yourself happier, that is doom scrolling.
Huh. Okay.
Um,
I
it's the
learned something.
actual terminology. Yeah, it's the actual terminology.
Okay.
It's terrible. I've never come across one that's changed my life. However, when I've been willing to take some time and say invest 50% of my day, which by the way is 50 minutes, which is by the way is 4% of your day.
Hmm.
1 hour is 4% of 24. Ridiculously small amount. But if we find someone who's willing to make that investment, what do you know? You get a big return on your time put into that.
Hmm.
And that is the kind of time spent in something that will change your life.
Hmm.
Hopefully, for the better.
Hmm. So putting the right things in, books, the right type of media today. There's so much out there that is just junk.
Hmm.
And like this whole thing, the I saw, I guess it's been around for a long time. It's just a number of months ago. I saw shorts on on Facebook. I'm like,
Hmm.
okay, shorts. So I hit one, and that's what it was. It was short, and I'm like, that was like 20 seconds of my life that I just gave away.
And you'll never get it back.
No, no, and that may be that may sound like not a big deal when you're 19. It may not be a big deal when you're 30 something, okay? But wait until you're 60 something and you're figuring out that there's less sand in the hourglass at the top and there's more at the bottom. And so you have to decide what the sand that's coming down into the bottom is going to be used for.
Yes.
Is it
Yes.
going to be to improve my life continually, even to the end? Or is it going to be used on frivolous things? I had a good friend of mine that passed away today, um, in Colorado. I met him because of a lady that I had known for many years. We had been in conferences together, and she was not planning to get married. She'd gone through a divorce. She said, I'm not going to get married. And all of a sudden, this man is standing in front of her. They're in a conference, and he is arms in the air, crying, worshiping. And it was like, I guess I'm getting married again. I actually did the wedding. I went to Colorado and did the wedding. Um, and just a amazing man. His name was John. And about 10 years ago, I guess more, he began to show signs of dementia. The last 10, at least 10 years, his wife has given of herself. She loved to travel, could not do any. She loved to go out and minister, could do nothing. Got to the point that he looked across the table at her and said, now, where do you live? And there would be times that after dinner, he would say, no, I need to go home. And he becomes so adamant about it that she would put him in the car, drive him around the town they live in, come back, park the car, go inside and say, you're home. You know, there are a few people in the world that will do something like that. Um, to see people that will give of themselves, that's a rare breed, Alex. And so I think that go ahead. Let me get my thoughts
No,
together again.
I absolutely agree that it is. As a nurse, I have held the hand of dying old men
Mm-hmm.
and held them through their last heartbeat because I was the only person there.
Yeah.
Um, that's sad. Um,
And what are they doing in that moment? With John, I would his wife we would communicate occasionally on text, and she would send out a blog telling a little bit about the situation, and even into his last weeks of life, about the only thing he wanted was to read scripture and to listen to worship music.
mm,
Though he didn't know who his wife was, in his last weeks of life, he knew who his God was.
mm,
That's a great man in my book.
yes, absolutely.
Find people who know who their God is. Surround yourself with, if you can't find them, find a book about one. I'd be glad
Hmm.
to recommend numerous ones, and begin to read about people who gave of their lives. I tell you, a great book, not an easy read, is Fox's Book of Martyrs. It was rewritten a number of years ago, and called Jesus Freaks. It was
Mm,
kind of updated, but the original Fox's Book of Martyrs goes back and talks about the disciples, how each of them died, early leaders of the congregation in Jerusalem and past that, and people through the centuries that gave their lives in such unselfish ways. So Fox's Book of Martyrs is an amazing, amazing book, and it challenges you at your core to become the person that the Father intended you to be. And in the end, is that not really the purpose of life?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Um, you know, Miles Monroe, the
Mm-hmm.
fantastic
Mm-hmm.
anything by Miles Monroe. Of
Mm-hmm.
course, it wrote Pursuit of Purpose. But his statement there says that death is not the worst thing that happens to man, but rather the worst thing is to have lived and not known why.
Mm-hmm.
So to find your purpose in many ways is part of your process of becoming the godly man, the godly woman that you should be. And that embracing of that purpose then gives you the strength to swim against the stream and to weave your way between all of the dead fish heading downstream,
Mm-hmm.
because you can recognize that you're embracing that purpose and that you do know who your God is.
See, back to the tree. You have two fruit trees that one of them needs to be pollinated. They have to be pollinated in order to produce fruit. And it's the process of that pollination that's intriguing, that you put, those two trees apart, and neither one of them are going to bear fruit. But if the tree does what it's supposed to do, which is put leaves forth and then put blossoms out, then it attracts the bee, who then goes to one tree and then the other and pollinates it. So if we're just doing the very basic things that we're supposed to do in life, which is to put out the leaves, to put out the blossoms, then the Creator is going to find and bring the bees that are needed for us to complete the process that He
Absolutely.
intended for us.
Mhm. He's not going to let our efforts towards fulfilling our purpose go empty and go
Oh, no,
unreturned.
no, no, not at all. Not at all. Well, Alex, I don't know about you. I've got some things I can think through here about this.
Same.
And
Yes, sir.
yeah, and I hope some other people are. If you have, topics that you like, guys, you may be sitting out there going, well, I'd like to email them, but I really, I just don't, I don't, they're probably so busy. Well, we're not. Okay. We're just not that busy. So when this goes up on YouTube, or wherever, leave a comment, or you can contact us. Our email, my website, all that stuff is on these things. Send us an email. Send me an email, onpurpose@mail.com. You can send it through that, and we'd be glad to deal with product, or with subjects that are on your mind, not just me and Alex talking to each other, though we enjoy that.
We do. And this three-part series came about by somebody making a request
Yeah.
of us to dig deeper into a subject. It's exactly what these last three episodes have been. Is
Yeah.
digging deeper into subject by someone's request of, hey, I want to hear y'all talk more about this. So by
Okay.
all means, please.
Yeah, and before next week, it'd be great. So we know what we're
Yeah,
talking about next week.
absolutely.
Yeah, but if nobody emails, we're still going to figure this out, because what we're about is seeking the one who is the plans for us, plans for good and not for evil, because you and I know that He has given us a future and a hope, and that's what we're striving for today. So till next week, Alex.
Who am I